Welcome back to coverage of the Budget 2024 from the Office of the Leader of the Opposition. I am Mervyn Williams. Together with Elson Lowe, we're going to continue this conversation on Budget 2024. Elson, we know that the Finance Minister will speak for perhaps 5 hours. And so we've got to intermittently come to our audience
Yes.
with bits of what he's saying. Let's start with
Yes.
the claim that the inflation rate for 2023 officially stood at or stands at 2%.
Yeah.
You have indicated from reliable sources that our inflation rate stands at 6.6%. How do you view Dr. Ashley Singh's claim of 2%? And if in fact his claim has merit, would our economy not be in better shape?
Well, what I'd say is I think that the forecasters and the the forecasts that the minister is making use of and the calculations are not at all the ones that I would rely on. I recall the minister saying at the last budget speech that they expect a 3.5% inflation rate for this year. Now they're saying it's 2%. But what we've seen out of the U.S. State Department is a 6.6% inflation rate, so far higher than what they are saying. And I believe around the last budget time, I had calculated a forecast of around 7%. So this 6.6% is in line with expectations. Now, of course, given that the government has expanded the national budget at a very sharp rate, it was highly likely there was going to be an inflationary pressure. And what we've seen is, I don't have to tell you, across Guyana, anyone who's shopping at the market, anyone who's been purchasing anything has noted the really sharp increase in prices. So for the Minister for Finance, I can't say Minister of Finance, for the Minister for Finance to come up and say 2% proudly, first of all, not acknowledging that he was way off with his initial projection, and second of all, that 2% is his what he's proud to say is quite surprising to me. 2% inflation, just to give you some context, viewers, is the type of inflation numbers that you see when there is really no meaningful inflation. So perhaps there's been I don't know if you've not had any price increases over the course of the year, but that seems to be what the Minister for Finance is telling you out of this budget.
Well, it's interesting that the government will lay claim to 2% inflation when the cost of living is in fact going through the roof.
Absolutely.
And leading to a point where citizens of the country have been demanding that the parliamentary opposition offers leadership in protest against the rising cost of living. In fact, there is such an event coming up on Saturday, 20th of January at 5 p.m. at the Burnham Court. Would there have been calls of this nature had there in fact been a 2% inflation only?
Well, there you go. A 2% inflation rate is no cost of living crisis. Really, that is an inflation rate you would expect if you don't have a problem with increasing prices at all. So again, it seems like the government is totally disconnected from reality when it makes these types of assertions. I even saw the Minister for Finance indicate a sharp increase in the money supply, 25%, which again is an indication of the type of thing that you typically would see linked to inflation. So this is again really concerning. The second thing to note is,
but where is it likely to come from, this 25% increase in dollars on the open market?
well, what that means is just that the government has been pumping a lot of Guyana dollars into the domestic economy, and that whether domestic supply has been able to catch up, I think it's highly unlikely, given that the growth of the non-oil economy is not expanded at that rate at all. But that is I think one of the key concerns. The other concern mentioned in his speech, which the government must address going forward, is there are some more warning signs around inflation. We've got again some concerns regarding the Horn of Africa and the trade disruptions, shipping disruptions. He mentioned disruptions in the Panama Canal. What this means is that the government must redouble its efforts to fight inflation. But if the government is not even acknowledging that there is inflation, then it doesn't leave a very optimistic picture out there for the average citizen.
But if these costs, doubling the price per container shipment cost, it means that with Guyana being a country that depends heavily on imports for its food
Yeah.
supply, it means that again we're potentially faced with rising costs of food, and with the rising costs of food comes a demand from the working class for increased income to mitigate
Absolutely. Yeah.
the rising cost of
Yeah.
basic food items.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So we will hope that some of the measures that will emerge from this budget will satisfy that kind of a demand from the working people of this country.
Absolutely, absolutely. We've seen really the government, I think, set the stage to try to say that the cost of living crisis is not a crisis, and that the measures, whatever measures they put forward, are limited because there's no need to do anything about the cost of living crisis. Now, one of the things we also want to point out to viewers is, and of course they know this, it's not that prices have returned to the levels that they were pre-COVID, but rather that we've had prolonged inflation, particularly in food, that has elevated these prices, and the prices have remained quite elevated.
Let's examine another possible source for the 25% increase in dollars on the open market. The public, forgive me, but this is really
Yeah.
really troubling. The value of the public sector investment program as outlined by the Minister
Exactly.
for Finance is in the region of 420 billion Guyana dollars, and with 41, $42 for every
Cents for every
cents
dollar.
for every dollar,
Yeah. You're looking
dripping
at a
up
massive loss.
172 billion Guyana dollars in loss
In losses.
through the public sector investment program. So we're talking about 172 billion dollars potentially lying somewhere in some bottom house, somewhere, obviously not in the banking system.
Well, there you go. Some of it will be lost due to corruption. That is under somebody's mattress somewhere, if you understand what I mean by that. And then the rest of it is lost due to incompetence. We would want to give Guyanese some examples of these losses. You may recall the gas energy project. The government decided to move that from Clonbrook, which was the original site, to Wales. That cost 100 million US more for no particular gain. That is just one example, and we've seen that right across the economy. Now, what is required, which is what we've been talking about, is a robust reform of governance in Guyana to ensure, one, that we stamp out corruption, and two, that we are properly managing these large investments that we're carrying out. The government has resisted calls to bring in consultants, to hire experts, and so on. And as a result, they're happy to see some of this 100 and in excess of 170 billion go by the wayside or be stolen. And when you look at only a $7.5 billion raise, that's 6.5%, was only $7.5 billion. 170 in excess of 170 billion dollars going by the wayside is a grave sin.
What could that have done for public sector workers? What could that have done for nurses or teachers? What could that have done for retooling and equipping our medical facilities across the country?
Absolutely. That is as large as entire national budgets not so long ago. So really, really concerning. Now, one of the things that we have committed to and we will continue to commit to is we're going to bring in experts. We're going to hire consultant firms. We're going to hire thousands of Guyanese, several thousand Guyanese, to help us to better administer the country, better monitor projects, conduct feasibility studies. And once we conduct those studies, we'll listen to the study, because we've got a problem where studies are out there and they don't even listen to the study. And the gas energy project is a classic example.
Well, it's in fact troubling, even beyond the absence of studies and reliance on the studies. What we heard early up in the budget presentation from Dr. Ashley Singh is that his government started and completed the Sheriff Street Mandela Road project. I mean, every citizen of this country knows that that is not true.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's a case of forgetfulness, Alzheimer's stepping in, or whether it's a case of deliberately attempting to mislead the nation, or whether it's a case of acute laryngitis. But
yeah, that's the question. Some of the remarks he made to start off, I thought, were particularly concerning. He mentioned a new era of Guyanese prosperity. One of the things this government doesn't like to do is to provide metrics of progress. What has happened with the 43% poverty rate that UNICEF had highlighted only about a year or so ago? What has happened regarding the effect that the high cost of living has had on increasing the level of poverty across the country? The government shies away from any kind of metrics to that regarding these types of issues, and that to me is very much alarming. But of course, if you're forecasting 3.5% inflation, you're coming in with 2% inflation, and independent measures are giving you 6.6% inflation. I can understand why they're shying away from any kind of measurement.
Well, it's interesting that the People's Progressive Party's budget theme is staying the course,
Ah, yes.
building prosperity for all, but that needs some qualifying, because staying the course that we have recognized is that public infrastructure projects are going to dominate. Public infrastructure projects are, in fact, being utilized as the vehicle for corruption. Those same projects accounted for that $172 billion shrinkage we discussed a moment ago. And if they are saying that they're going to stay the course, we can only hope for the worst in these circumstances. And building prosperity for all, we know for a fact that that is as equally misleading as a number of things he has said in this presentation so far, because every Guyanese understands, every Guyanese knows that prosperity is limited to friends, families, and favorites of the People's Progressive Party.
Absolutely.
And this is what public infrastructure spending is aiding.
Absolutely. One of the things he said that I thought was very interesting is he said, public investments enhance private wealth. And that reminded me of, they're saying a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yep.
But what happens if you don't have a boat? You don't get any benefits. And we've got so many Guyanese who don't have a home, who don't have access to education, who have not been able to benefit from an education that's provided them with the skills they need under this government. And so as a result, they don't have access. They don't have a boat. So as these monies are being spent, they're being bypassed altogether, which is a tragedy. Again, this is a government that doesn't like to monitor performance, just likes to spend money and then claim success without actually looking at people's improved standard of living.
Fortunately, while not every citizen may have a boat, every citizen, in fact, has a vote.
There you
And
go.
that can make and ought reasonably to make a difference whenever these next elections are called, regional and general elections, highly anticipated before the end of 2024. In many circles, that's the talk. As far as the PPP's position is, as announced by Jagdeo, it's next year, but widely anticipated to be this year. And this budget is widely anticipated to be a budget that fuels the campaign for the elections on the part of the People's Progressive Party. So we will continue to follow what's happening here at this sitting of the National Assembly, and we will continue this conversation and continue to see what's happening here, particularly as far as measures are concerned, as they are unveiled.
Absolutely. That's the conversation we're going to have, and we look forward to continuing to connect with you as we discuss Budget 2024.
So we're going to take a break at this stage, and we're going to continue to monitor what's happening here at the National Assembly, and we will, as promised, get right back to you. And at the end of it, we will get reactions from the leader of the Alliance for Change, Mr. Kemraj Ramjatan, and the leader of the parliamentary opposition, Mr. Aubrey Norton. So stay tuned. We will be back with you